Welcome back, viewers. Our focus remains to be on the top stories of this hour. In a significant ruling aimed at curbing arbitrary actions by the state authorities, the Supreme Court has pronounced stringent guidelines to eliminate the practice of bulldozer justice against the accused. This practice, employed by many states in the recent times, involved the demolition of homes and the properties of individuals accused of crimes before a fair trial. The apex court has declared that no house of an accused can be demolished solely on the basis of the allegations without the due legal process and its due completion. It has emphasized that the truth of such accusations must be determined by the judiciary and not the executive. It also stated very categorically that the executive cannot be judiciary. Taking a tough stand, the judgment reinforced the separation of powers, noting that adjudicator functions are reserved for the judiciary and the executive must not overstep its authority by assuming the role of the judiciary. The Supreme Court drew attention to the fact that demolishing a family home because one member is accused of a crime amounts to collective punishment, which is impermissible in law. The bench noted that a house is not just a property but a shelter for the entire family. Therefore, before the proceeding with demolition, the state must assess whether such an extreme measure is justified in that case, considering its impact on the entire family, including the women and the children as well. Keeping this in mind, the apex court laid down the guidelines. It has directed that no demolition should be carried out without the prior 15-day notice to the owner of the property. In another guideline, the Supreme Court said that the notice shall be served upon the owner by the registered post and fixed on the outer portion of the structure. The notice shall also contain the nature of the unauthorized construction, details of the specific violation and the grounds for the demolition decision. And the demolition has to be videographed. Violation of these guidelines will invite contempt. However, we see such cases where justice still takes decades to be served and delivered. We all remember how it took more than 8 years to deliver the justice to Nirbhaya. Thus, the larger discourse is around the quick bulldoze action versus the slow but sure case. Amid the justice delayed, justice denied maxim, how else can we speed up the law? All right, viewers. Now, joining me live on the broadcast to speak about how, in fact, this entire rhetoric of justice delayed and justice denied and the case of denying the bulldozer justice is my guest, Advocate Pinky Anand, who's a senior lawyer. Ma'am, I appreciate you joining us on the Newsx and thank you for giving us your time. First up, how do you view the Supreme Court verdict that has come yesterday? And do you think that will it put an end to the bulldozer justice debate that's currently happening in the discourse?
Definitely. I think the Supreme Court verdict is a landmark judgment, ultimately hailing down the rule of law. Because ultimately, rule of law means that you can't be denied of your rights without due process. And in this case, due process has been specified. And the reason for the entire judgment has been that you can't deny anybody their rights without advising them, without giving them an opportunity to be heard, without giving them sufficient notice, which is the elementary and basic principles of the rule of law. I think the judgment really heralds that principle in and holds that you can't either bulldoze or destroy people's properties, which are also their homes, and not only their homes, but their families' homes, without hearing them and without seeing the reason why that is being done.
As you strongly agree with the verdict that has in fact come at this point where many are also appreciating it, why do you think have the government resorted to bulldozer justice or let's say the bulldozer action in retaliation to the crimes that have happened in so many cases and across states like Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh and these states where the kind of degree of crime is very intense?
I don't think that is correct. I don't think government has resorted to such measures as being said. These are instances of situations do happen in demolitions, for example, or undertaking such processes does happen. I do not know the entire background of why this might have happened, but really what is being ultimately upheld as the fact that you can't do it in this fashion, and that is why you have the separation of powers and the judiciary to step in when there is failure on the part of the executive or its officers. That's what the court said, that the officers who've been responsible for these actions would be taken against them.
As you're also favoring that action should be taken in the cases where the degree of crime is very intense and heinous, do you also think that the government argument of setting the precedents with these kind of incidents, especially with bulldozer justice, have not worked for at least the cases that we see and we face in a country like ours?
Obviously, they have not been accepted as such, because the question is, it is not a question of precedent or no precedent. The ultimate issue is that when in a particular case or in particular cases, injustice is being done to the common citizen and without reason and without considering due reasons and without considering the due process of law, in that case, courts will step in to do appropriate justice for the common.
In your opinion, ma'am, very categorically, isn't bulldozer justice in itself a lesson to the judiciary too, in fast tracking cases to avoid the executive from taking the coercive steps, if we talk about that?
I don't think there is a definite linkage in that concept, because here the question is not whether proper justice was not done in trying the issues. There were unrelated issues on the basis of which it seems that the bulldozer justice had been done and the buildings had been razed down, and the Supreme Court has corrected the path to say that you can't do it in this fashion and without following due process of law. But aside from that, the fact that there should be fast tracking of courts and matters, definitely we all look for that principles where you can have disposal of cases within a given time span. Definitely there is a reasonable delay which should not be there. Reasonable as in there is unreasonable delay which should not be there in the system, and it is prevailing. So we do need to expedite, and I do think we need to expedite the cause of people in a majority of ways. And we have to ensure that everybody looks up to the rule of law as a hallmark of how life should be run in a democracy such as India.
Then in such a case, ma'am, if cases like Nirbhaya have dragged on for 10 years, in which there was a clear case of rape and murder, these are the kind of degree of crimes which they are heart-wrenching, they are inhuman, and they are very, they put an impression of such a kind of crime that has happened. Don't you think that the executive gets forced in restoring to quick this steps of justice to keep people's faith in the system? Because there's a lot of anger.
No, I don't think that is an argument. I see Nirbhaya's case, it was a most unfortunate case that we've had in the Indian history in the recent last few years. And definitely you can't think of a more horrendous crime than happened to Nirbhaya. But please do understand that we as a democracy have set out our systems of law also. And the systems of law do demand that an accused has a right to be heard. There is no clear-cut case of rape and murder. Of course, there is street justice. But when you go through the process of law, you do have to establish in the court of law as to what has happened. The fact that it should be within a given time frame is one part of it, and that is definitely correct. But more importantly than that is also the fact that you have rights of appeals. And in India particularly, and as much as any other country, you do have people going right up to the Supreme Court to try and see that they are ultimately either acquitted or not convicted, or they are let off. So you can't deny people the right of justice on the basis of people's perception or common man's perception of what the offense might be. So Nirbhaya's case, though honestly speaking, I do agree with you. It is there, but if everybody is going to do justice on the basis of what people believe, then there'll be street justice. The reason of putting up an entire system of law is otherwise. So the question is not that you take 10 years, which is a long time span. It is a long time span, and you should shorten it in all possible ways and fast track the system. And that's why constantly efforts are being made by the executive, by the judiciaries to try and expedite the process and to lessen the burdens of courts. But there is a problem. Then we do need to address it. But delay in court decisions or in disposal of cases is not a reason why anybody can say that it really has any kind of impact on the executive. I mean, that's another facet altogether.
But ma'am, the major question that actually arises at this point of time, given the present scenario, how do we restore faith in the judicial system by the people, especially in order to avoid the vigilant justice like encounters and bulldozers that we have seen in rape cases? Because there is such a mounting anger, the faith of the people, the faith of the sufferers, the faith of the victims also needs to be restored. So how do we go about that?
Honestly speaking, I think we are very clear in this country. I think people have the highest faith in judiciary. And that is why in the present case also, people have gone to the Supreme Court, ultimately seeking justice, and they've got their justice in terms of what had been done wrong. It is not as if in every society everything is right. Things do go wrong. Systems sometimes go wrong. People sometimes act wrongly. And that is why you have such a powerful judiciary and a judicial system such as we have in India, which ultimately decides what must be done in a given case where people have gone wrong. So you do have justice given by the courts, and I don't think you can have a stronger system than one that exists in India.
All right, senior lawyer Pinky Anand, thank you for giving us your time and also giving us your insights and deep understanding of what needs to be done as far as the merits of the judgment and the verdict of the Bulldozer Justice judgment by the Supreme Court has come. Now we are shifting our focus to another important development that we are tracking very